Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are or whenever you're watching this. Welcome to another episode of No Foolish Squash Questions. My name is Paul Frank. I'm the squash director at Squash Tigers here in New Jersey, which is my fun little shirt on, my glass courts behind me and whatnot. To my left, to my right, on the other side of me is Colin White, who's the boys coach at the Hackley School. How are you, buddy?
G'day, mate.
G'day, mate.
There's my one little bit of Australian.
Look, I never say g'day. I mean, people are really disappointed when they find out they've got an Australian who seldom if ever says g'day.
I'm from Ireland. I never say top of the morning.
Well, yeah, well, that's just there's no excuse for not saying that. I mean, no wonder people are disappointed with you. Anyway, at the start of this, I always try and remember to say if anyone has something we haven't touched upon or something they'd like us to talk about in the future, or questions about, well, for example, about the Squash Tigers program or about what you're doing up at Hackley. Drop us an email, nofoolishsquashquestions@gmail.com, which may be a real mouthful to say, but pretty easy to type. So nofoolishsquashquestions, one word, @gmail.com. Bump it off to us, and that comes to both Colin and I, and then we can either laugh about it or get some of your feedback or deal with something else at a future stage. For today was one of the ones that we've been meaning to do for a little while in terms of questions. The question was, what are the most often repeated foolish things done on a squash court? So what are the most foolish tactical moves that you see repeated? And certainly in our case, it'll be mostly with junior squash because that's what we're dealing with at the moment. But still a fun one. I mean, normally we like to focus on the positive, but when you keep seeing the same silly things over and over, it's probably worth having a quick chat about it. What do you think, mate?
Absolutely. I totally agree with that.
I was going to kick off with my favorite old-fashioned one, which is the most frequent piece of feedback from almost anybody for some ungodly reason, is to hit it to the backhand, which, as I'm fond of saying to people, might be the right answer. But sometimes it's just a lazy thing for people to have something to say. If we think that the vast majority of repetitions that kids have, especially when they're at a good level, maybe when they're a beginner, just get the ball back. But certainly when they're advanced, the vast majority of their work has already been up and down that backhand wall. So the chances of that being a distinct weakness, a top 32 under 17 is probably remote. But you still keep seeing people just randomly hammer that corner for God knows what reason for hours. So that's my pet, not so much mistake, but my pet grrr. Have you got a pet grrr?
I guess the biggest one is a cross off a cross, especially that the boast goes in and a lot of the time the cross just gets smacked right back to that other person, and usually it's more they go for the par. I mean, if you're going to play it, at least have some variation and some awareness where your opponent is. If they stayed back, so a cross, which is bouncing short, would be quite interesting. If they're coming charging forward, a cross which has a bit of height would be very interesting.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, what people say and what people do. So if you ever talk, I mean, in my experience anyway, if I talk to kids who are new to my program, and you'll say, what's the most common response off a boast? And all of them will say straight drive because that's what they think that they're expected to say. And then, of course, when you chart a match, the most common response off a boast, an insidious number of times, is a cross court. Like the link is eerie sometimes. It's almost every situation. And as you said, it's not necessarily wrong, but with a little bit of variety, that's a killer. On that note, what's your favorite? If you had to give one answer, what's your favorite reply to a boast?
Well, I guess if anybody's watched any of these, they know it would not have been the straight drop because that was almost alien to me. I wish I could say it was the straight drop. For me, I probably would have been the straight drive or the cross court drive, which is why probably a better player soon realized that when they did take me short, I wasn't going to do that much to hurt them. So they didn't have to cover as much of the court, which made, even if my straight drive or cross court was not bad, they were not having to cover as much of the court and they were able to hurt me more with it.
Yeah, a number of times I begged for someone to play a counter drop, It's sort of like, please play. I'll do anything you want. Just play a counter drop. They post up, just play a counter drop. Pretty please. Yeah. And then, of course, you get to a stage where, at a more advanced level, of course, there's stuff to be done after the counter drop, but play the counter drop. just let's not make it harder than it seems to be at the beginning. What are your common problems around serve return, buddy? Anything that you keep seeing tactically off serve return that annoys you?
Oh, this could be a whole sort of one by itself. Yeah, I mean
Well, make a note. Hang on.
I've got to say the biggest thing that with the serve and return to serve that we've been working on is trying to get the players to understand that it's a restart. It's a chance to restart and have a little thought process of what it is that they're trying to do. And then that encouragement to take a good position. The amount of players that I see stand too far back and then they just watch that ball sort of drop into the back corner and good night. So yeah, I mean, I think it's the fact that it's a restart, whether you're serving, return to serving, take that little bit of time. If anybody watched Rafa Nadal win his 21st major title at the weekend, realizing people like to make fun of his little things as he prepares to serve.
Rituals,
just, yeah, his little rituals, but they're his way of bringing every point to the now and every that here we go, and this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm going to do. If we could get our kids doing a little bit more of that, that would be a big jump forward, in my opinion. Opinion.
Oh, I agree with all that. One of my pet dislikes is people who give that slightly vegetarian backhand floaty serve for no reason. Yeah, they've seen some of the top pros do it, who may have their own reasons, but certainly for kids, you're serving from a forehand service box, that kind of quasi lazy, like it's not a lob serve, it's not a clear, it's not a jaw serve, it's just kind of putting it into play, just rolling the arm over. Now, when you think that it's one of the few times you get the ball in your hand, you can do whatever you want. You could serve it high, you could, nice little lob serve, you could bang it as a jaw serve into the side wall. Goodness knows you could hit it at them. There are infinite number of things to get some sort of advantage. And what do? They kind of just start the rally in a neutral way. And every time someone does that, sort of a Ferry dies, or at least a small part of me does, I go, oh my goodness, could you just do something with it? I used to, when I was national coach in Scotland, I used to offer the kids a milkshake if they hit their opponent with the serve. And I had to stop it because I was buying too many milkshakes at the end of remember the old Super Series events? Yeah, so the European version of the JCTs. I was buying too many milkshakes at the end, it just looked bad for people's diets. You're nutritionally challenged because you hit half a dozen people with a serve. But at least it got them aware of the interaction, and it's, of course, more than a little bit of fun. It's sometimes worth 2 or 3 points. You bounce a ball off somebody's head or off their other parts, and it can sometimes unsettle them.
Yeah, very much. I always try to say to mine, it's that you'll just resort to habit. You'll just sort of go into autopilot when you serve a return serve, and whatever your habit is, that's what you're going to do when you don't sort of stop and think about it. Now, if you got a great habit and I used to play with a guy in my team who had the most wonderful lob serve. The fact that he used to put a big glob of sweat on it before he served it, let's not judge him too much on that. But he had a one that came down almost with ice on top of it. But so if you have that good habit, then continue on autopilot. But if you don't, and you don't think about it, you're just going to go back to what you've always done. And then don't be surprised that suddenly you're scurrying after your next shot because you haven't put enough pressure on with that first shot.
Yeah, I mean, and then you're always reminded with just funny things to shake it up. I mean, in terms of fun things, in Australia, I'm from a state called Victoria. So one of the pets of certainly some of the guys playing league in Melbourne used to be to receive serve standing on the short line. And the number of times that I've seen someone go to receive serve standing on the short line, and the other guy lob it out of court because they're busy being discombobulated by the circumstances, is a fairly long list. It leads you back to that old question. I did it with one of the kids in a lesson a few days ago. Where do the rules tell you that you have to stand to receive serve? And of course, the answer is the rules don't tell you have to stand anywhere to receive serve. If you're serving, obviously 1 foot entirely in a service box at a minimum. But if you're receiving serve, you can go with the blazes you want. So I always laugh when people exploit that just a little bit. I'm not sure I'd advocate it for everything, but if you've got the hands and the willingness, you'd be amazed how much disruption you can cause by standing a little bit further forward. For
me, it's that thought that with kids that, and I said before that I grew up playing adults, even from when I was a young age. That we played adults all the time. I'm sure it was the same with you in Australia. You played league, you played adults. That it just gives you such a variation of people that you come up against, who just present you with so many different problems that you have to solve. Where a lot of the time when you're just sort of going through junior tournaments, it tends to be the same problems, higher levels and different levels, of course, but very few variations in the way people play. And that just sort of, it's such a learning curve to have to go on with adults who maybe don't look like good players, but they can make you move, and they're strong enough to put up with you banging the ball about. And so, yeah, I feel it's a hole in the learning for kids now, that they don't get to play maybe as many adults as I had the good fortune to be able to play.
It's funny. I mean, nowadays I've just kind of accepted that's just 2022. That's my world. So what you end up doing is trying to come up with modified games to kind of force those sort of outcomes. So you put a modified game in place, or a pattern, a drive by strop lob. That way they're made to lift out of the front. You're going to have to volley 1,000 times. Whereas if you just left them on match play all the time, it's like if you left someone to play a guitar who can't really play the guitar. Someone playing the same 3 chords all the time isn't that attractive. So that's where the whole role of a pattern or a modified game kicks in. You kind of make people expand their repertoire a little bit more, hopefully in a way that's consistent with good tactical practice.
Yeah.
Simple. The long from behind, the short from in front, a little bit of variety of those things. Anyway, this was too much fun. I'll love you and leave you. Thank you for your time as always, mate.
You're very welcome. Always good to see you, mate.
And to everybody else, again, no foolish squash questions. Difficult to say, easy to type, at gmail.com. Any responses, always gratefully received. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, mate.
All the best.